After 6 months of unemployment, Amelia finally lands the job that will save her life. The only problem? On her first day, she realizes her new CEO is Julian, her ex. The man who shattered her heart 5 years ago, and now she has to call him Mr. Thorne as her boss. The Thorne Industries building soared, a tower of glass and steel gleaming in the morning sun. For Amelia Hayes, it was her first day, and she could feel a mix of nervous nausea and adrenaline crackling in her veins. This wasn't just a new job. After 6 brutal months of unemployment, a threatening stack of bills, and a near-crippling sense of desperation, this position as a strategy analyst here was her lifeline. This was her new beginning. Her new manager, a friendly man named Mark, greeted her in the magnificent lobby.
"Excited for the first day, Amelia?"
he asked, handing her a new access badge.
"Very,"
Amelia replied, trying to make her voice sound more confident than she felt. Mark showed her around. The office was modern, an open space filled with natural light, high-end coffee machines, and stunning city views. Amelia began to relax just slightly. She'd made it. She was here. "All right," Mark said after they'd dropped Amelia's bag at her new desk.
One last introduction before we dive in. It's a little tradition. We have our CEO, Mr. Thorne, likes to personally greet all new hires on their first day.
Amelia's heart beat a little faster. Of course. She just hoped she could make a good first impression on the man at the top. Mark led her down a quieter hallway, lined with expensive dark wood, toward a set of double doors at the corner of the building, the CEO's office. He knocked lightly, then pushed the door open.
"Excuse me, Mr. Thorne?"
The office was vast, dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that revealed the entire city skyline. A tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit stood with his back to them, looking out the window.
"Mr. Thorne, this is Amelia Hayes, our new strategy analyst,"
Mark said cheerfully. The man turned around. Time stopped. Amelia's world tilted. The blood drained from her face, and the nausea in her stomach turned into a cold, sinking horror. It wasn't a stranger looking at her with a blank, professional expression. It was Julian, not just any Julian. It was her Julian. Julian, her first love. Julian, the man who had lived with her for 2 years in their cramped, book-filled apartment. Julian, the man who had shattered her heart into a million pieces 5 years ago, who left with the cliché excuse,
"I need to focus on my career," and never looked back.
Amelia's brain screamed, "Run! Get out of here! Now!" But her feet were cemented to the floor. She remembered the stack of bills on her apartment desk. She remembered the shame of having to borrow money from her parents. She couldn't run. She was trapped. The man before her barely reacted, but Amelia, who knew him better than anyone, saw it. The fractional widening of his eyes, the tightening in his jaw. He recovered faster than she did.
"Mr. Thorne?"
Mark prompted, oblivious to the tension in the room. Julian stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. He looked like an expensive stranger in his suit, not the man who used to make her coffee in the morning.
"Ms. Hayes?"
he said. His voice was cold, flat, and foreign. It was the voice of Mr. Thorne.
"Welcome to Thorne Industries."
He held out his hand. It took all of Amelia's remaining strength to lift her own trembling arm. She placed her cold, damp palm into Julian's brief, firm grip.
"It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Thorne,"
she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her first day wasn't even an hour old, and Amelia realized she hadn't just landed her dream job. She had just walked into her worst nightmare. Amelia didn't remember how she got back to her desk. The entire rest of her office tour with Mark felt blurry like a fever dream. She sat in her new ergonomic chair, staring at her new state-of-the-art computer, but she saw nothing. The man in the corner office, it was Julian. Her mind raced, trying to connect the impossible dots. The Julian she knew was a brilliant but poor dreamer, living in a cramped apartment full of used books, constantly talking about changing the world. The Julian she knew wore faded band t-shirts and worn-out jeans. The man who had just shaken her hand was Mr. Thorne, a cold CEO in a $1,000 suit. Thorne Industries, of course. The surname she once thought was ordinary was now emblazoned on the lobby of a skyscraper. He had succeeded. He had made it. And he had done it without her. A vibration on her desk made her jump. A new email. Her heart seemed to stop. Sender, Julian Thorne. Subject, Q4 Strategy Projections. Initial materials. The email was brief, cold, and impersonal. It outlined her first assignment, demanding an analysis of competitor market data, and it was due by Friday. The email was CC'd to Mark and 3 other senior executives. It was a clear message, clearer than any conversation. This was not Julian. This was Mr. Thorne, and she was Ms. Hayes. The first week was a silent torture. She threw herself into her work with a desperate focus. She had to. She needed this job. She analyzed the data, built the spreadsheets, and drafted the report. She worked late, becoming the last person to leave, just to ensure there was not a single mistake. She was determined to be the best employee the company had ever had. She would be so professional that Julian would have no reason to criticize her. Their first big meeting happened on Friday. The entire strategy team gathered in the main boardroom. Amelia sat at the far end of the table, trying to make herself invisible. Then Julian entered. The room instantly went quiet. His aura was different. He was no longer the shocked man in his office. He was a leader. He was sharp, demanding, and brilliant. He dissected a senior manager's presentation with precise questions. Amelia watched him, fascinated and horrified. This was the Julian she always knew existed, the version where his ambition was fully realized. For the entire 2-hour meeting, he never looked at her, not once. He spoke in her direction, asking questions of the analyst team, but his eyes never landed on her. She was just another chair at the table. That afternoon, she needed clarification on one of the data points for her report. Avoidance was no longer possible. She picked up her notepad and walked to the corner office. His door was open. Julian was on the phone, his voice firm. He motioned for Amelia to enter and wait. Amelia stood silently in front of his massive desk, feeling small. Julian hung up the phone.
Yes, Ms. Hayes?
The cold voice pierced her.
I need clarification on the queue for data,
she said, her voice professional.
You mentioned projections from the east, but the report only includes...
The second attachment, Ms. Hayes.
Julian cut in, not looking up, his eyes fixed on his computer screen.
The data is segmented. I expect my strategy analyst to read all the materials before asking basic questions.
Amelia's face burned, a mix of shame and anger. It was a sharp, unfair reprimand.
Right,
she whispered. She turned to leave.
And Ms. Hayes?
He called out. Amelia paused in the doorway, looking back. Julian finally looked up at her. His gaze was cold, emotionless, and completely foreign.
We are professionals,
he said.
You do your job, I do mine. Nothing else. Is that clear?
Amelia swallowed.
Perfectly clear, Mr. Thorne.
She walked out, her heart hammering. These were the new rules of engagement. This wasn't a nightmare. This was her new job. The first month passed in a tense, professional blur. Amelia was the perfect Ms. Hayes. Her reports were sharp. Her analysis was insightful, and she never missed a deadline. She avoided the elevator if Julian was in it. She got her coffee during off-peak hours. She built a fortress of professionalism around her desk. Mr. Thorne, on his part, kept his word. He was cold, demanding, and fair. His criticisms were always about the work, never personal, but his manufactured distance felt like a constant low-grade slap. Amelia was getting used to the routine. She had almost convinced herself that she could do this, that she could work for this man, hate this man, and collect her paycheck. Until a Tuesday afternoon, Julian, Mr. Thorne, did something he rarely did. He left his corner office and walked out onto the main floor, where the marketing team was in the middle of a heated debate in front of a large digital whiteboard. Amelia watched from behind her computer monitor. Julian listened for a few minutes, his face impassive. Then he did something that made Amelia's heart stop. He took off his expensive suit jacket, draped it over the back of a nearby chair, and rolled up the sleeves of his crisp white shirt. That gesture, simple, practical, but it was Julian. Suddenly, Amelia was no longer at Thorne Industries. She was back in their cramped apartment 5 years ago at 2 a.m. Julian, wearing a faded t-shirt, was rolling up his sleeves in that exact same way before, frantically scribbling his business ideas on a stack of used cocktail napkins. She remembered the fire in his eyes, the husky passion in his voice as he explained how he was going to build something that lasts. In the conference area, Julian picked up the digital marker. He erased the marketing team's entire plan with one swift motion.
You're all thinking too small,
he said, his voice carrying across the hushed floor. He began to draw. His hands moved fast, full of confidence, twisting their ideas, connecting concepts in a way that was brilliant and that no one else had seen. Amelia stared, mesmerized. The resentment she had been nursing, resentment over how he left. His coldness in the office began to falter. She was looking at him, not as the cruel CEO, but as the man whose mind she had always admired. The ambition she had once loved was the same ambition that now drove the man before her. He hadn't changed. He had just succeeded. A sharp, unexpected pain pierced her chest. It wasn't hatred. It was longing. She realized with a slow, creeping horror that she was fighting a daily battle not to hate Julian, but to stop herself from loving him all over again. The professional rules Julian had established now felt like a cruel joke. He was forcing her to keep her distance, while she had to sit there and watch everything she had ever fallen in love with, now on display in a more powerful, successful version. Amelia quickly snapped her gaze back to her computer screen, forcing herself to focus on the rows of numbers. But the image of those rolled-up sleeves remained burned in her mind. The love she had buried for so long wasn't dead. It had only been dormant. And now, working 20 meters away from him every day, it was beginning to wake up. Amelia was lying to herself. She said she hated Julian. She said she was just there to work. But her internal turmoil, seeing the man she loved beneath the CEO's suit, was leaving her off guard. She became clumsy, and her hyper-awareness of his presence made her prone to mistakes. The first incident happened on a Wednesday. Amelia was rushing around a blind corner near the conference rooms, her mind on the presentation she'd just finished, her arms full of a laptop and stacks of reports. She didn't see Julian walking quickly from the opposite direction, his focus on the phone in his hand. They collided. Not hard, but enough to send the reports in Amelia's arms scattering across the floor.
I'm so sorry,
Amelia began, immediately crouching to retrieve the papers.
Watch where you're going, Ms. Hayes.
Julian's cold voice sounded from above her. Before Amelia could react, Julian crouched as well to help her. They were face to face on the polished floor. Their hands met on the same report. Julian's fingers, warm, strong, and painfully familiar, brushed the back of Amelia's hand. It was only a fraction of a second, an accidental brush of skin. For Amelia, it was like an electric shock. Her heart leapt into her throat. Every memory of that hand holding hers, of that hand brushing her face, it all came flooding back. She froze, staring at their joined hands on the paper. Julian snatched his hand back as if he'd been burned. He stood up in one fluid motion, his expression rigid and unreadable. He did not offer a hand to help her up. He just stood there, towering over her.
Sorry, sir,
Amelia whispered, her face burning with humiliation. She hastily gathered the rest of her papers and stood.
Ensure you are more focused on your surroundings,
Julian said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. He turned and walked away without a second glance. Amelia leaned against the corridor wall, her heart pounding. The touch had lasted barely a second, but Julian's cold expression afterward felt like a slap. It was a brutal reminder. For him, it was nothing. For her, it was everything. The second incident occurred 2 days later. She had to deliver a revised financial report to his office. Julian was at his desk, busy signing documents.
The report, Mr. Thorne,
Amelia said, placing it on the edge of his desk to avoid any contact. Julian didn't look up. He just held out his hand, his eyes still on what he was signing.
Give it to me.
Amelia pushed the report toward him. Julian reached for it, but he misjudged the distance. Instead of grabbing the folder, his long fingers closed over Amelia's as she held it. This time he didn't pull back instantly. He froze. Amelia froze too. For 2 suffocating seconds, they were connected by the folder, their fingers touching. Amelia could feel the faint pulse in Julian's fingertips. She lifted her eyes, and Julian, startled by the contact, looked up too. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Amelia saw something she had not seen in the office. Panic. Just for an instant, the CEO's mask cracked. Then Julian snatched the report from her hand.
That's all,
he said, his voice hoarse. He immediately looked back down at his documents. Amelia fled the office, her heart racing. She saw it. He wasn't just cold. He was afraid. The climax happened that night. It was 8 o'clock. The office was nearly empty. Amelia was working late to avoid making any more mistakes. She went to the executive pantry to make another cup of coffee, thinking she was alone. She was pouring the hot water when the silent pantry door hissed open. Julian walked in. They both froze. It was a small room. Too small. The silence between them was heavy and deafening. The only sound was the hum of the coffee machine. Amelia was pinned in place, her back to him. She could feel his presence behind her. She could smell the faint, expensive scent of his cologne. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure he could hear it. Julian said nothing. He just stood there, in the tiny room with her, waiting his turn for the machine. The awkward tension was so thick Amelia could barely breathe. She wanted to run, but she had to wait for her coffee to finish. Finally, the machine clicked. Amelia's hand trembled slightly as she picked up her mug. She had to turn. She had to pass him to get to the door. She turned slowly. Julian was standing by the counter, arms crossed, blocking her path. He wasn't looking at Amelia. He was staring at the wall above her head, his jaw tight.
Excuse me,
Amelia whispered. Julian moved, not to let her pass, but to grab a mug from the cabinet. Their arms brushed, his stiff shirt sleeve against her blouse. Amelia let out a small, sharp gasp. Julian closed his eyes for a brief second, as if in pain. He didn't say a word. He just took one large step to the side, clearing the path. Amelia practically ran out of the pantry. She returned to her desk, but she was no longer thinking about work. She realized a terrifying truth. Julian wasn't cold. He wasn't indifferent. The man was just as tormented as she was. The morning after the pantry incident, Amelia arrived at her desk with a dangerous new resolve. The tormented man she had seen. The man who closed his eyes in pain at her touch. The man who couldn't even look at her in a small room had erased the cold CEO. She was no longer afraid of Mr. Thorne. She was, however, deeply worried about Julian. She replayed the accidental touches, the brush of their hands on the floor, the brief static-filled grip on the report. These were not the actions of an indifferent boss. They were the flinches of a man desperately trying to keep a mask from shattering. She realized the coldness wasn't for her. It was for him. He was protecting himself. This new, terrible hope was worse than the hatred. The love she had worked so hard to bury was now fully awake, and it demanded answers. She couldn't work like this. She couldn't sit 20 meters away from him, trapped in this silent, professional pantomime. It was more agonizing than the original breakup. She had to try. She waited all day for an opportunity. She watched the clock, her heart pounding in her chest. 1 p.m. came, and the floor began to empty. 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Finally, she saw him. He emerged from his office, shrugged on his suit jacket, and picked up his briefcase. The floor was empty. It was now or never.
Julian.
Her voice, using his name, sounded shockingly loud in the quiet, cavernous office. He stopped, his back to her. He didn't turn around for a long moment. Then slowly he faced her. His expression was not angry. It was tired, guarded. Amelia walked toward him, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor near the elevator bank.
Please,
she said, her voice trembling but firm.
We can't keep doing this. This silence, it's...
Julian's face hardened. The brief vulnerability was gone. The Mr. Thorne mask clicked back into place.
I don't know what you're talking about. Ms. Hayes, you submitted the K4 report. It was adequate.
The condescending, formal tone made her snap.
Stop calling me that. I'm not Ms. Hayes to you. I'm Amelia. Or have you forgotten that too?
She was standing in front of him now. She could see the pulse beating in his throat.
Her
voice softened, all the anger draining away, replaced by the 5 years of stored-up pain.
I just need to know. Are you okay? It's been so long. I see you in meetings, and I see you on the floor, but I don't understand what happened.
She was vulnerable. She was offering him an opening. She was begging him to see her just for a second. Julian looked at her, and his expression turned to ice. He took one deliberate step closer, not as a lover, but as a boss. He used his height and his suit as armor, towering over her.
What happened, Ms. Hayes?
He said, his voice lethally quiet.
Is that I became your employer, and you became my employee. That is all.
Julian, please don't,
she whispered, the rejection hitting her.
There is no us in this building. There is only this company. You were hired to do a job you claim you wanted. I expect you to do it.
He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping so only she could hear.
Do not ever mix your personal history with your professional life again. Now with me, just work well. That is all I require from you.
Work well, it was a dismissal, an erasure. The ding of the arriving elevator echoed in the hallway. It was his escape. He stepped into the empty car without looking back.
Have a good evening, Ms. Hayes.
The stainless steel doors slid shut, reflecting Amelia's own shattered expression back at her. She stood alone in the empty, darkening office. The sting of tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The rejection was absolute. It was colder and crueler than the breakup text 5 years ago. The man she loved wasn't tormented. He wasn't trapped. He was just gone. Only Mr. Thorne remained. She walked slowly back to her desk. She sat down, her body numb. She looked at the complex spreadsheet on her screen, the numbers blurring. She took a long, shaky breath and straightened her back. If Julian was gone, then she had to let him go. If Mr. Thorne wanted a professional, that's what he would get. The love she felt, the hope that had flared up that morning, she actively crushed it, pushing it down into a cold, dark place. From now on, she wasn't Amelia. She was Ms. Hayes, the best damn analyst this company had ever seen. The wall was back up, but this time it was hers.